Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and the author of the best-selling second edition of The Codist, now out on Kindle for $2.99, answering your questions about what happens to your DNA that you send off to 23andMe and the diabolical plot contained within these pages. You can get it right now, The Codist, $2.99 on Kindle. And also the author of the best-selling book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, just released in Indonesia. Imagine this book about the Jewish view and the biblical view as a believer of the Tree of Life in the Garden of Eden, and the 7 Laws of Abundant Living, lessons learned from the Tree of Life, taking you on a journey from the natural into the supernatural. Get your copy today. It's my pleasure to welcome to this hour the Derek Gilbert Hour, host of Skywatch TV, a Christian television program that airs on several national networks, the long-running interview podcast, A View from the Bunker, and co-host Sci Friday, a weekly television program that analyzes science news with his wife, author, and analyst Sharon K. Gilbert. His professional radio career spanned 2 decades, including stops in Philadelphia, St. Louis, and Little Rock. He launched PID Radio with Sharon in early 2005, making it one of the first podcasts on the internet. Derek is a Christian, a husband, a father, co-author with Josh Peck of The Day the Earth Stands Still, Unmasking the Old Gods Behind UFOs, ETs, and the Official Disclosure Movement, and author of The Great Inception, Satan's Psyops from Eden to Armageddon. He's also authored the novels The God Conspiracy and Iron Dragons, and he's a contributing author to the anthologies God's Ghostbusters, Bloods on the Altar, I Predict What 12 Global Experts Believe You'll See by 2025, and When Once We Were a Nation. He appears on the Igniting Nation Broadcasting Network here on Revealing the Truth on the second Monday of every month at the 11 o'clock a.m. Central Time hour. Derek Gilbert, welcome back to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you. It's my honor to be here. And welcome back to the United States after your trip to Israel.
Thank you so much, and to you as well. It's interesting that you were there last month, and after you got back, I left. And we didn't get a chance to talk last month while you were there, and I just returned last night. So I kind of wanted to get your observations, if you will, about what you saw and how some of the dots that you and I have talked about over the course of the last year and a half are starting to connect.
Well, one of the things that really struck us is how slanted news coverage is about what's going on over in Israel. While we were there, of course, that was when Iran launched a few missiles from the Syrian side of the border across the Golan Heights. None of them landed in Israeli territory. No injuries on the Israeli side, but and at the same time, because of the move of the United States Embassy and the 70th anniversary of Israel's independence, there were these March of Return protests along the Gaza border, where Hamas was. It was reported and documented by a reporter for The Telegraph in the UK that Hamas was actually paying people to go to the border.
Yes.
And if you got shot or injured, you actually got paid more. So they were coercing and bribing people to rush the border, rush the armed Israeli soldiers. Now, you would think that the entire country was in flames from the news reports that we saw at the hotel. And I know that our friends and family members back here in the United States were seeing the same thing, because we were getting a lot of email, notes through Facebook and so forth saying, we're praying for you. Is everyone okay? Are you guys safe? Et cetera, et cetera. Well, we never felt unsafe a single moment that we were in Israel. The day that we traveled to the Golan Heights, because we wanted to see Mount Hermon, we wanted to see Banias, which is the Grotto of Pan, a place known in the ancient world as the literal entrance to the netherworld, or at least that's what they believed. That was the day that Iran began moving some of its assets on the Syrian side of the border. And the government of Israel warned residents of the Golan to prepare their bomb shelters because something might happen. Well, we went to the Golan anyway, and the only change that we had to make in our schedule was we were not able to visit the summit of Mount Ben Tal, which is there's an IDF observation post there from which you can see Damascus.
Right.
And that's something else that struck me, by the way, as an American. We're kind of used to the wide open spaces that we have here. Here in the Ozarks, the closest major city to us, and Springfield, Missouri is a decent-sized town. It's a college town, about 150,000 people when you include the suburbs and everything. But I mean, the closest major metropolitan city with an international airport would be Kansas City. That's 3.5 hours away. St. Louis is 4.5 hours away. Tulsa is actually closer to us. That's about 2.5-hour drive down the interstate. You cannot see any one of those cities from the highest point in our county, which is basically the ridge on which Sharon and I live. But when you're when you're at Bethel, for example, where Jacob saw the angels ascending and descending to and from heaven, you can see Ramallah, which is the capital of the Palestinian Authority on the West Bank. From certain spots in the Golan Heights, like Mount Bental, you can see Damascus. Gaza is only about 50 miles away from Jerusalem. So, the sense of scale that I think we Americans have is way off when it comes to how close together things are in Israel. And you can begin to understand why they don't want to go back to the pre-1967 borders, because that would essentially make the country indefensible. The Golan Heights is key to Israel's security, and so is holding on to the West Bank. So that was something that struck me. But the IDF soldiers who blocked off the road leading to the summit of Mount Bental the day we were there were sunning themselves on the hood of their Jeep. And that's not to say they were shirking in their duty or taking it lightly. It's just they weren't really worried that something bad might happen. Now, our friend Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis says, well, that's soldiers everywhere throughout history. They're always looking for an opportunity to relax because they don't get that many. But the point is, while we were there, while we were in Jerusalem, while we were in the West Bank, we never at any point felt like we were not secure. And that surprised some people. I mentioned Bethel. We visited Bethel. We also visited Shiloh. Both of those are in the West Bank. We talked with a well-known pastor who just returned from Israel himself. He had a tour that had 14 tour buses. We had 2. Okay, so that gives you a sense of where we fit in the scheme of things. But he asked us, and he was serious, whether we took a bulletproof bus when we went to Shiloh and to Bethel. And again, the answer was no, and we never felt like we were not secure. We visited Hebron to visit the Cave of the Patriarchs, the Machpelah, the big structure that Herod the Great built to honor the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the cave where they were buried. While we were in Hebron, we could hear pistol shots in the distance. But again, we had IDF security around us. And so again, we never felt like we were in danger, even though that Cave of the Patriarchs is located in a small Israeli enclave in the middle of what is basically a Muslim Arab community. So that was something that really struck me. When we set up the tour last year, and we realized that when the president had announced his decision to move the American embassy on the same day Israel celebrated its 70th anniversary of independence, there were some who asked us, "Don't you feel like terrorists might try to do something to disrupt that?" Well, okay, maybe they'll try, but you better believe that between the United States Secret Service and the Shin Bet and IDF, that Jerusalem would be just about the safest place on the earth. And as we walked around Jerusalem through the old city of David, we saw small children walking unescorted. In fact, a group of 6 that our tour guide talked to while we were visiting the city of David told him that they walked to school in the old city and back again, Hebrew school and back, without an adult accompanying them. I'm sorry, but we don't do that here in the United States. Even in, safe neighborhoods, we don't let children 7, 8 years old walk to school and back without an adult escort.
What's really interesting is you were there, I think, 2 weeks before I was, and I made it to Mount Bental without any problem whatsoever. Mm-hmm. We even went as far as getting up to the road up to on Mount Hermon, to Nimrod's fortress, but they were repaving the road. It wasn't that the site was closed, but they were just repaving the road, so we couldn't get that far up. But we were there. We were right on the border to Lebanon. We
Yep.
were 65 kilometers from Damascus itself, literally 40 kilometers from the outlying neighborhood of Damascus that they expanded the neighborhoods because of all the shelling, and then so they built closer to the Israeli border. At the time I was there were only 2 IDF soldiers with binoculars and high vision systems, and so everything has calmed down. The Iranian Guard, of course, Israel retaliated after those 20 rockets were fired. 3 of them were intercepted, 17 landed on Syrian soil. The protests that were going on in Gaza has now turned to kites with incendiary devices, and so fires were breaking out. But to show you the Israeli technology in mind, once they began to see kites with incendiary devices, they began to develop technology to deal with the kites. And 2 weeks after it started, they now have technology developed in order to take those kites out of the sky before they cross over into the Israeli border. So the fast response time to these kind of situations is mind-boggling in an environment where here in the United States we had 9/11. I don't know that we could actually have a system in place here in America to thwart another 9/11 attack. We don't have the laser technology. We don't have in Israel Iron Dome and David's sling, and now they're introducing a third technology which is completely laser-based for taking out any type of weapon that is airborne. And so it is stunning. Now, we experienced the exact same thing. Now, unfortunately, as a Jew and with a Jewish guide and a Jewish driver, I'm not welcome in Hebron. I'm not welcome as a tourist and would have to change buses to go to Ramallah, to go to Jericho, to go to those other places. And some of them are marked Jews not allowed here, and you certainly saw that. But,
big red signs.
Big signs. No Jews allowed in this place. But it was stunning because I have, for the last 16 years that I've been going to Israel, I have many Muslim friends who are Israeli citizens. And we greet each other as brother. People were stunned at the first location we stopped at, and I got off the bus, and a Muslim man comes running up to me, and he throws his arms around me. But I hadn't seen him in a year. And so we kiss each other on the cheek, kiss your brother with greet your brother with a holy kiss. We kiss each other, we embrace, we have a conversation, and I introduce them to the group, and their mouths are like, because truth be known, the Israeli Arab Muslim population, the politicians have messed up everything the same way the politicians have messed up everything over here. They've messed up everything over there. And they would be very happy to be under Israeli leadership. They would be very happy to be normalized Israelis and just get along. Their kids go to school with Jewish kids. They go to school with Arab Christians. You'll see an Arab Christian child holding the hand of an Arab Muslim child, holding the hand of a Jewish child. They don't know anything about it, and they live in the same neighborhood, and they have absolutely no problem whatsoever. I have Muslim friends all over the land that we share with. We talk to them. They know who we are. They know all about what we stand for, and we're able to, over time, build relationships that are as lasting a relationship as the guide that I'm with and I've been with for so many years. And so people are really shocked at seeing the interaction and the actual brotherly love that's extended and safe. How can you not be safe in a country where every police car has his lights flashing? Much different than America. You see flashing lights in America, you get nervous. They flash their lights all the time. In America, they want to catch you and trap you. In Israel, they want to let you know they're present. And that is a deterrent. It's a brilliant strategy, and only unless you hear the siren do you pull over. And so it's a presence, there is a present sense of peace all over the land, even on the borders, the communities that are close to Gaza. They still have a sense of security, knowing that because of every boy and girl, Arab, Jewish, the Druze even volunteer. And they're not required to volunteer, but they volunteer and have mandatory service within their own community. Druze being a branch of Islam that's a little bit different than traditional Sunni or Shiite. So we experienced the exact same thing and saw the exact same thing that you saw and experienced over there. There's no sense of imminent danger, and nothing has changed in 4,000 years.
Well, we were just very, very impressed with the level of security and the welcome that we received there on the part of both Jews and Arabs, Jews and Muslims, because we spent then several days over in Jordan visiting Petra, Wadi Rum, which is the desert of T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. Right. Visited Madaba, which was a community that was within the territory of Reuben, if I remember correctly, east of the Sea of Galilee. And of course, we climbed Mount Nebo, where Moses was given his view of the Holy Land that he was not allowed to enter himself. But that relates to my forthcoming book, was able to see the plains of Moab, which I argue are the location of the Valley of the Travelers that Ezekiel talks about in Ezekiel chapter 39, relating to the Gog-Magog war and where it's going to come to an end. We took a lot of video and a lot of pictures, and it's right now I'm in the process of trying to put that together into a sort of travel log, a video travel log that we're calling Search for the Titans, the old gods of the Greeks who my research shows are actually just the watchers, the angels who kept not their first estate and who are confined in chains and gloomy darkness, just like the Titans of Greek mythology. Right. And it's not a coincidence that they're one and the same. It's because they are one and the same. But they've also got a role to play in prophecy, not just in Revelation 9, where the abyss is open and they are released for a short time, but in that final battle, Armageddon, which I argue is the Gog-Magog conflict. But seeing some of those key sites, Mount Hermon, of course, which is significant because it was the site of the Watchers' rebellion, but also because it was considered by the later Canaanites as the Mount of Assembly for their creator god El, who I will argue in the forthcoming book is one and the same with Baal-Hamon, the chief god of the Carthaginians who demanded child sacrifice. Right. And of course, that would make him the leader of the Watchers' rebellion, the Titans, the Watchers being one and the same. Seeing that location, seeing the Grotto of Pan-Banias, seeing the plains of Moab, the Valley of the Travelers, seeing Jericho from Mount Nebo, just an amazing thing. And just to echo something that you said about the way the people of the land get along. For the most part, it doesn't make headlines when you see people who get along as neighbors, even though they may have different, religious views. Our guide, who is an observant Jew, asked a couple of Arab shopkeepers as he took us through the old city one day what they thought about the troubles that were taking place down in Gaza. And of course, while we were there was when 62 people were shot and killed as they tried to rush the border. Come to find out later, Hamas admitted that 50 of those 62 were Hamas militants, were fighters who, they weren't poor migrants trying to seek asylum or anything like that, which is kind of how they were portrayed in the media. But the words that these Arab shopkeepers in Jerusalem had for the Palestinians of Gaza were not something that could be repeated on this program. They did not have a very positive view, shall we say, and that's really putting it mildly.
You know what people don't really understand, and it's great we're having this dialogue because it's hard for the world to conceive of the fact that the indigenous people of Israel are the Jews. Mm-hmm. And that those that call themselves Palestinians happen to be actually terrorists from Jordan, from Egypt and from Syria that were not welcomed back into their own countries because of their violent actions against their own government.
People forget that King Hussein of Jordan kicked them out, kicked out Yasser Arafat and the PLO.
Right.
With his military. Basically, the military came in and cleaned out the camps and drove them out.
And if you talk with Tas Seda, who was Arafat's man, he wrote a book called Once Arafat's Man. He was a personal sniper, and his story is that he fled from Israel because he was assigned to assassinate King Hussein, and it was the only assassination that he failed at. And he fled to the United States. He lives in Kansas City, came to the Lord, and has an incredible story about working as a terrorist, but came to faith, repented, and now he has a ministry based out of Jericho and Jerusalem, where he builds schools. This is his recompense to those that he fought against. Now, certainly there was a war going on at the time, and he's been able to gain and regain status and favor within Israel. Seed of Abraham is one of his ministries. Fascinating story that, they were kicked out because of their behavior, and they're exhibiting the same behavior. The fact that in Gaza, they chose, instead of lining up with the Fatah party of the Palestinian Authority, they chose Hamas, which most people don't realize that in Hebrew the word Hamas means violence. And so they chose to have a violent leadership that once again takes all the funds and uses them for their own wealth, and the rest of the Palestinians who are stuck in Gaza are suffering at the hands of their own leadership. And this is the same thing we see in North Korea, that people suffering in camps and in places of destitute situations. But to understand the heart of Israel, the preservation of life, and my group troops are quite a bit different. We visit Ammunition Hill, and one of the this was in the 6-day war, this is where the ammunition was stored and the position that they held in this battle that brought about the reunification of Jerusalem. There is a plaque which talks about the heart of the IDF, the heart of the Israeli soldier, is the sanctity and the preservation of life. Therefore, what you didn't see reported on Gaza was that if someone was wounded in that encounter, Israeli medical service people would cross the border and render medical aid to the person that they just shot. And people don't understand that the heart of Israel is not to take a life.
Right.
It is the preservation of life that is sacred to the Israeli heart.
It was also not widely reported that the IDF offered medical supplies to Hamas after that encounter on May 14th, and Hamas refused it.
And, Hamas blew up their own humanitarian aid station. They cut off power. They blew up they sent a rocket that hit their own, the power plant that served the substation, which brought electricity to Gaza. And Israel, within a miraculous period of time, restored electricity because they didn't want to bring harm to the citizens and the residents of the portion of Gaza which is away from the border. And none of this is reported in any media, anywhere, at any time. And the portrayal of the people and the IDF and the Israeli government is so slanted. And this was your opening comment, was that the media perspective on Israel is so skewed, and the Christian view of Israel is so skewed. This idea of the boycott, divest, and sanction even comes against a company like Ahava, the Dead Sea products, because they have a factory where they employ at a national wage level, bringing people who live in Judea and Samaria, working with Dead Sea products in the packaging and production of it, and a very large percentage of their workforce is made up of Arab, Palestinian individuals that come into the factory and make some of the best wages of all the Palestinians, because the Palestinian economy in itself is like that in Argentina, like that in Venezuela. You know, it's a depressed economy. So here they are blessing these people, and people want to boycott them because they're employing them. This is a mindset that is so diabolical and so consumed with hatred that it's impossible to understand. We're going to take a short break. We're talking with Derek Gilbert. We're comparing notes about our recent trip to Israel, both the biblical connection and the media perspective of this. And when we come back from break, we're going to talk about some of the biblical connections, because he mentioned Gog and Magog and Ezekiel 38 and Ezekiel 39, which I'm quite passionate about, and his visit to Petra, which is a very important place for me, because in my belief system, as I look at Zechariah 14, not as the arrival place of Jesus, my belief is that since the Jews are not in Jerusalem, that will not be the place he first sets his feet. I believe that the place he sets his feet will be Petra, to redeem the leadership of Israel, and then he makes his victory march, that 200 miles from Petra to Jerusalem, and we're going to talk about that interesting perspective with Derek Gilbert when we return from this short break. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere, and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website, www.ianbn.com.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and welcome to the Derek Gilbert Hour, where we meet with Derek Gilbert once a month to talk about exactly what we're talking about, the things of our time and how they line up with the Bible. He's the author of The Great Inception and The Day the Earth Stands Still, and a host of other wonderful books, and a host of Skywatch TV. Derek, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
So you talked about Ezekiel 38 and 39, and Ezekiel 38 gives us four kind of prerequisites, if you will, four established things that tells us a description of the conditions at the time in which this battle will take place. One of those conditions is that Israel is in the land. And I believe that God has a standard for what in the land means. It's not the Balfour Declaration. It is not the Oslo Accord. It is Genesis 15 as the standard for what's in the land. That would mean Lebanon, Syria, most of Iraq, all of Jordan, northern Saudi Arabia, and northern Egypt would be included in that biblically mandated border. The second requirement is it be a land without fences, walls, or gates. Well, right now, Israel's in a state where they have plenty of fences. The entire country has a fence around it on every border. It has walls in many places, security walls, and it has gates. And you went through the gates as you went through the checkpoint to go into the Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, and come out. You came in through a gate. The third requirement is that Israel has to be at peace with its neighbors. And this is what we look at as the 70th week of Daniel, the first 3.5 years of that last week is everybody's at peace, and so we're looking at that time when there's peace. And the fourth requirement is that Israel has to have so much wealth, and it specifies silver and gold, that the world would want to plunder it. Well, I struggled with that for a very long time because Israel didn't have the natural resources of Saudi Arabia or Iraq or Iran. However, the largest oil deposit has been located under the Golan Heights, and the Leviathan natural gas pocket has been found off the coast of Haifa. So I began to examine that and said, okay, we refer to oil as black gold. So, all right, check mark in that box. Then I began to ask people, well, how do you send a pipeline from Haifa to Cyprus, which is now where they're building a pipeline? And they said, oh, you have to use stainless steel. And I said, the color of stainless steel is silver.
Oh, silver, yeah.
So now I've connected the puzzle piece that I've been pondering for so long, because there's no silver mined in Israel. There's no gold mined in Israel. What is God telling us in this picture? And now we have silver and gold to the point that this will put Russia on its heels. It will send the Middle East oil as Zion Oil and Noble Energy are the two big players in this market, come into their fullness, and Israel begins to start pumping and processing and refining oil. This is going to set the Middle East on its heels from an economic standpoint, and Russia and its allies in bringing oil to Siberia is going to have to look at renegotiating his position, which is then going to usher in a season of peacemaking, because you don't want to take the largest oil reserve in the world and turn it into a battlefield. You want to be able to get that because everybody's concerned about their populations and what are they going to do about their people. We saw in Iran a rebellion rise up against the current regime because the people were so oppressed. We're seeing that in South and Central America. People are starting to say these conditions are horrible. We're expecting a regime change in the Palestinian community because of the poor and awful conditions and the wealth of the leadership and the poverty of the people. So we're starting to see the stage being set for a lot of these things that you and I have talked about before as this campaign of Armageddon. And as I look at the Jezreel Valley, where everybody says, oh, well, that's where the battle's going to be fought. And actually, we don't have any record of the battle being fought there. We see that as a staging area, like London was in World War II for the United States troops and our armament, and we brought in tanks into there, and we brought in artillery, and then we brought it across Europe from London. We see that being the gathering place of the armies of the Antichrist and their base of operation, because the Bible tells us the battle will be fought on the hills of Israel, where the people have fled to, because there's a warning God gives. And so it's fascinating as you looked out over the Jezreel Valley, you saw the Air Force base, but you didn't see any planes. But the all the F-16s and F-35 or 45 or whatever it was that made this stealth run that nobody knew about. Don't remember the name. I'm not a aircraft guy, but you would know it as F-45.
Yeah, the F-35, the new Joint Strike Fighter.
All right. So two of those made it into Syria and back again, and nobody knew it until Israel finally leaked it out that they made a bombing run with it, and nobody knew because it was so stealth. You couldn't, no one could see it. So we're seeing biblical prophecy unfolding before our eyes, and these settings are being staged, or the stage is being set as you and I look at this for an upcoming encounter. Do you believe that this encounter will happen at the 3.5-year mark of the tribulation period, or do you believe that it's a different timeline for that?
Well, I look at the 39th chapter of Ezekiel and compare what he describes as the aftermath of the Gog-Magog conflict, and then compare that with the slaughter of Revelation 19. I believe that the Gog-Magog conflict will culminate with the Battle of Armageddon.
Right.
Which, as you say, will be fought on the hills of Jerusalem, because the key word there, and as you say, we did visit Megiddo, and we visited Mount Carmel, and so we got a panoramic view of the Jezreel Valley below, which was really incredible to see from a historic standpoint, because that was the valley where the last good king of Judah, Josiah, was killed in battle against the Egyptian army led by Pharaoh Necho. But it's been taught for many, many generations that Megiddo will be the site of Armageddon, and that's because of a misunderstanding of how the Apostle John transliterated the Hebrew phrase Har Moed into Greek, and as scholars in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries tried to reverse engineer the Hebrew from the Greek, they missed the fact that the Hebrew character ayin was replaced with the Greek letter gamma. because there's no corresponding letter or sound in Greek or in English to the Hebrew ayin. And so the phrase Har Moed, which means Mount of Assembly, which we see in Isaiah 14,
Right.
that passage, how thou art fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning, wants to establish his Mount of Assembly in the heights of the uttermost north, or the heights of the north, which points to a mountain in Turkey on the border with Syria called Jebel al-Aqra. Back in the day, it was called Mount Zaphon, which everyone in the ancient world knew was the location of the palace of Baal, the storm god. Baal, identified as Lucifer by Isaiah, identified as Satan by Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew and also in Revelation chapter 2, Satan's seat, which was the altar of Zeus in Pergamum. So you've got that location there, the Mount of Assembly. That is the key point. That is the objective of the enemy in this final war, is God's Mount of Assembly, which is Zion. That's Jerusalem.
Right.
It wouldn't make any sense for the battle to take place 50 miles away in Megiddo. It was believed, and many scholars, students of prophecy, still believe that Armageddon is based on the Hebrew Har Megiddon, meaning Mount of Megiddo. But when you go to Megiddo, you see, okay, there's a hill there, but it's what's called a tell. It's because you've got 30 layers of construction stacked one on top of another there, as Megiddo was occupied for a couple thousand years. But the phrase, because of the mistake in inserting a g sound with the letter gamma, where you're supposed to be a sort of a glottal stop with the ayin,
right,
in the Hebrew, it should be Har Moed, not Har Megiddon. And the Har Moed of Yahweh is Jerusalem. That's where Armageddon will be fought. And so being able to go up to Megiddo and contradict an official Israeli Park Service film strip on Megiddo was actually kind of funny. But our Jewish tour guide said, it's okay, the film strip is as old as Megiddo, so don't worry about it.
Well, it's fascinating to be there and see it. Now, did you go to Masada?
We did. We visited Masada, which is a fascinating monument to not only to the resolve and the desire of the last rebels in the Great Jewish Revolt of the years 70 to 73. Josephus tells the story about how the last defenders committed suicide when the Romans had breached the wall, rather than be sold off into slavery or be killed and watch, and know that their wives and children would be abused and sold off into slavery. They essentially committed mass suicide. Only one woman and 2 children survived. But it was also a monument to the ego of Herod the Great, who built not one but 2 palaces on top of this mountain overlooking the Dead Sea. I guess just one summer palace wasn't enough when you're a friend of Rome. So an amazing engineering feat.
Yeah, and he never visited there.
Really?
Yeah, Herod never ever. There's no record of him ever visiting that place. What's so interesting is there's great history there for my people, but it is, and every trip I take, I go to Masada. And for our audience to understand that Masada is not just a historical place, it is a place where you will, if you think very carefully about it, you're going to have to make that same decision that they had to make. You're going to face that same circumstance when the Antichrist rises to power, and you are forced to decide whether or not you're going to take the mark. While they threaten the life of your wife and children, will you succumb to the pressure? Or will you be like those last holdouts that said that we will not bend our knee or ever be enslaved again as a people? And this was a statement, and a prophetic statement, that says that when that day comes again, and I tell the families, you go home and you have this conversation with your family, and you set for yourselves what will be our family response. Even if they take our newest grandchild and hold a gun or a knife to their throat, are we going to accept that mark because once you accept it, and our audience needs to understand, the Bible's pretty clear that once you've accepted that mark, you have forsaken salvation. There is no turning back. There is no final appeal on your behalf. That if you're a believer and you take that mark, you have forsaken. Jesus said it is better to have never known me than to know me and turn your back on me. And so when I take people there and they are stunned when I read the final oration of, and I'm sure you read it, you heard the final oration that was read to all the men as they went and drew lots to go kill their children and their spouse, and then the final one who had to fall on his sword. And will you be one who will succumb to the mysteries and the miracles and signs and wonders of this Antichrist that will come and set himself up in what I believe is the tribulation temple, that everybody's fighting in Israel to build this third temple? And I say to them, and I know the people at the Temple Institute, do you not read the book of Daniel? Well, Daniel is very clear, but Daniel is not considered a prophet in Judaism. Okay? He's in the Ketuvim. He's in the writings. He's not in the Nevi'im, the prophets. And that's because he was a seer, not a prophet, according to Jewish tradition. He didn't say, "Thus says the." He didn't say, "Thus says the Lord." The Lord didn't say to him, "Daniel, write this down and tell the people this." There were several requirements they had for a prophet. So, as a writer, like Asaph was a seer. Now, Joseph was a seer, but Joseph is not considered a prophet. Asaph was a seer, but not considered a prophet. We have Daniel as a seer, but not considered a prophet. And then we see in the New Testament, we see John the Revelator, okay, as an apostle and not seen as a prophet, not listed as a prophet. He's given a vision and he's describing, he's narrating. He's not bringing a new word, because we see these same words all throughout the Old Testament, beginning in Exodus and then all the way through. He's just connecting in a cinematography kind of description all of the events that are going to occur. And what's interesting about the angels that he's speaking to, the angels of the churches, those are seven Jewish churches. Notice Antioch's not mentioned. There's some stunning revelations in Revelation that's quite interesting. And we only have 4 minutes left in this segment. New discovery that 90% of all animals appeared at the same time. How did you respond to that? What was your reaction when you saw that?
In a word, duh.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting that scientists and geneticists look at this and now they're trying to figure out, okay, well, that means there must have been some sort of cataclysmic event that caused just a reset. Maybe it was a comet that hit the Earth, or a pole shift or something. They're trying to come up with something other than the flood or creation to explain away the sudden proliferation of life all at the same time.
It's such a stunning creation reinforcer. And then briefly, this discovery of life on Mars. Now our alien friends, our UFO friends, our galactic traveler friends are just going to go absolutely berserk over this. Finding of a life form on Mars.
They keep pushing the meme, but I think we need to be very careful to remember that the discovery of organic molecules does not mean the discovery of life. There are inorganic processes, or rather, I should say, there are processes that can produce organic molecules that don't require the existence of life. So finding organic molecules, okay, that's interesting, but it doesn't mean that they've discovered life. But the other important point to remember is this. God created man in his image. That means we are his image bearers, his moral agents on earth. And even if an actual extraterrestrial from Zeta Reticuli were to land on the White House lawn, that does not change our status as God's imagers on earth. We are still uniquely created and hold that title regardless of your level of development, how old you are, how young you are, your capabilities, your inabilities, whatever. You are still precious, created in God's image, his image bearer on this earth, and the existence of life somewhere else out in the galaxy, which this is not, by the way, this new discovery announced by NASA. But even if life were discovered elsewhere in the galaxy, your status as an image bearer of God does not change.
You know, it's so fascinating. The study of the word bara is so important for every believer, every Bible reader. The word is B-A-R-A. It appears several times in the Bible, but it is an attribute of God, and it's even attributed to Jesus when he created the eye for the blind man at the pool of Siloam. It's interesting, the euphemism there is blind from birth. Now, you have children, they don't do visual acuity tests because you can't tell. First of all, how do you get recognition? You don't. So the expression blind from birth has the meaning born without eyes. This is the only way you can confirm that a child is blind from birth. And so they went to his parents to say, you know, was he truly born without eyes? Because what Jesus did was he took exactly how his Father created man and reached into the dust of the earth, spit into it, and created an eye, and that was the act of bara. Man cannot create. We can recreate, procreate, we can instigate, we can procrastinate, but we cannot create. And this is an attribute of God. Derek Gilbert, we have run out of time for this segment, but it is just always so much fun to have these conversations with you. Unscripted, unadulterated, biblical truth from two people that are radically sold out. And as Carl Gallups and I always say, we don't have to agree or disagree. We stand on the Word of God. And there's no right and there's no wrong when you stand on the Word of God. These educated and informed conversations we have bring unique perspectives so that you and I can both iron sharpen iron, look at things a little bit differently. I take notes, you take notes, we go off the air and both of us start looking at, well, what did he say?
Yeah, exactly.
And how did he come to that? And is he onto something, or is he half a bubble off? And maybe we'll talk about that on the next Derek Gilbert Hour. Derek, thank you so much for being with us. Look forward to seeing you next month, same time, same day, right here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with the next episode with Carl Gallups. Shalom.